Hey, so I'm in Barcelona. Typically, I would be doing this live. Yesterday, my wife and I finally got the opportunity to tour. Because keep in mind, both of us are working while we're here. So our work day, or our day, is spent essentially working during the day and then getting the opportunity to kind of do things on the weekends. I do the news on the weekends when I get back, so that's always constrained. But that said, we're coming out of the train station. I am pulling a cigarette out of my pocket. No, I am not a smoker. Yes, every so often I do cigarettes. I think it's just a replacement for the pot I used to smoke back in the States and not having access to it here. And not paying attention, I'm walking out and I bump into a completely naked man with, it looks like he has a loincloth. And there's a guy who's holding on to him with like a leash or something on his arms, and there's a bunch of other guys around him laughing hysterically at me being kind of stunned by this process, and they're blowing a horn. They're like, meow, 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 so everybody can draw attention to the fact that this guy's naked and moving through the streets. This was the funniest shit I've ever seen in my life, and the guys were laughing hysterically at me being stunned by bumping into a naked man being dragged on the streets of Barcelona. I have no idea what was taking place. I don't know if they lost a bet. These guys are pretty intense about soccer, or as it's called here, football. If you're coming to Barcelona, one of the things I would encourage you to do is go into a bar during the time where they were playing a soccer game. I am not into soccer, but in that moment I was Barcelonian and I was cheering for that team like my life depended on it, with this kind of throwing myself entirely into the process of wanting the Barcelona team to win. There's an electric environment where everybody in that place is screaming or booing at the camera. I know that back in the States I think they have stuff like that with football. I gotta be honest, I never necessarily care about football, but being here, it's infectious. It's infectious. Get a coffee, get a tea, get a cappuccino, sit outside in one of the big screens, be amongst the crowd. You may not even speak the language, but you don't need to speak the language. It's certainly understood from the standpoint of the game being played. I don't know if this guy lost the bet. I don't know if this was the practical joke type thing. Apparently they had the, I don't know what it's called, where the people perform the statue and then the kid run to the top. I don't know if it had something to do with festivities. All I know, there was a naked man walking on the streets of Barcelona with a group of people blowing a horn to draw attention to him and taking him several blocks, because you could hear them blowing that horn several blocks away. It was cold that night in Barcelona, and I would imagine his ass cheeks were freezing. Fucking travel, man. Alright, I'll end this here. This was just funny as all hell to me. I guess maybe this video is 3 minutes, so let me talk a little bit more about the Barcelona itself. One of the things that I noticed here in Europe, each place has its own flavor. So each place has a texture, you could say, that you as an American, there's a relative distinction between those things, and so you notice the relative distinction because it's different than what you have here. So one of the things, look like 90% of the people walking down the street, if they're a couple of Holds fans. That's mind-blowing to me, because to me, I want to get from point A to point B and I want to get to where I'm going, and sometimes my wife is beside me, sometimes she's in front of me, sometimes she's behind me, but very rarely, unless, you know, it's something where she wants to hold hands in the sunset or something like that because of some kind of cultural thing that's been rammed into her. But here, it seems as natural as could be where they just hold hands. Even older couples, younger couples, their affection, just in general, in the way they engage with each other, tends to be higher. So even in work sites, they tend to be more affectionate. Now, this was true also in Lisbon and in Portugal, where I was like, this guy is molesting, one of my nurses is molesting one of the other nurses, and I know his wife is here, and I realized that's just the way they engage when they're friends or when they're close. Like it's there's a like a couple like this group right here, kissing each other on the cheek, deep hugs, not a quick pat, like a fully affectionate hug. It seems to be just the norm in comparison to what we do in the States. Again, relative distinction or relative distance. Touchy-feely, meaning in communication, oftentimes there's contact made, almost to get across that we are communicating, not just talking. It's fascinating. And again, that's one of those things that you kind of notice as an American, because it's not necessarily something we do in the States. It's few and far between. One of my friends, Kenneth, was that way. Now, he would fit in perfectly here, but in the States, you know, it's like he's molesting people, in which case it's somewhat of a fail. And if I'm not mistaken, somebody called a sexual harassment thing on him. It wasn't sexual harassment. That's just the way Kenny is. Kenny even does that to men. He has a wife. But if you're a female and he was doing that and you don't know him, you're like, oh my God, this guy's touching me inappropriately. Treatments. The house is here, just like in the States. In my case, I went through Divarium. Divarium allowed me to essentially make the treatments myself, where I could say this is what I want to do them. And they have a full-on hospital bed. Now, that's always funny to me, because in the States you have a chair, not a bed. But nurses are very attentive. There's always a doctor in the house. In the States, you have a doctor every so often. If you were a European citizen or if you were Spanish, no charge. Your society evolved and says we're not going to allow people to live in poverty for this, and we're not necessarily going to allow people to take the brunt of this expense. So yes, of all of your worries dealing with stuff like that, cost is not one. Call that evolution. I'm standing in Maturo. Maturo is a little ways outside of Barcelona. The problem came in, I needed, my treatments are in Barcelona, so I have to take a train, but I always like trains. So even if the train ride is 45 minutes, when I was staying in London, I think I was staying on the outskirts of London, and I would have to take a train 45 minutes in. I don't feel the time, so I enjoy it. Maturo is beachside, so we're like a little ways from the beach. This is the town square. One of the things that you need to be aware of is siesta. So at 2 p.m. or 1 p.m., it depends on the place, they go on break. And that break can last like 2 to 3 hours. Now that is mind-blowing, coming from the States, where sometimes you barely get 30 minutes for a break. They have enshrined like 2-hour break. Now, that's great for the workers. And yes, I approve. That's awesome. People should live. The whole point of life is living. But if you need to get to an orange store because your gigabytes went down, you may bitch and moan about the fact that that's taking place. Here's what it is. I guess you plan around it and you'll be aware of it. I ended up just going to the beach and enjoying it for a couple of hours until the store opened back up. I like it. Lisbon, I had more of a feel, meaning there was a feeling for it. I can't explain it. There was a closeness to it, even though I can't necessarily put my finger on the closeness. But for here, I don't necessarily have the closeness to it. But so far, we've been here for a few days, and I like it. I like it. I was a member of the National Honor Society, but they talk so fast. So fast. So my broken Spanish. Another thing, it makes me very understanding of people who are coming to the States who don't speak the language. My wife said something similar. She was like, God, I would never bitch about somebody not being able to speak English good. Seeing as we're going from place to place and we can't speak a lick of some of the languages. Let's speak a little bit of Spanish. But Portuguese, not so much. But there are elements of Portuguese that sound like Spanish, so you can kind of get by no matter your way through. Polish, none. Arabic, none. Romanian, none. Lithuanian, whatever the language they speak there, none. I don't even know the language they speak. So, you mutter your way through. in an odd way, the Brits have spread the English language all throughout the world. Masters of the universe, the white bird, and all this other stuff. And so it allowed you a leeway in this because they can really understand in some way. Many people can understand what you're saying. So I'll leave this here. So far, Barcelona was great. I like it. All right, guys. Have a good one.